welcome to the River Channel's St. Croix County Board Candidate Forum. My name is Meg Heaton, and it's my pleasure to interview the candidates for the position of District 6 Supervisor on the St. Croix County Board in the upcoming April 3rd election. District 6 is located in the city of Hudson, along with a section of Hudson Township, and includes wards 5, 8, 11, and 12. The candidates are incumbent Bob Long and challenger Tim Hall. These are interesting days in politics and government, and I want to begin by thanking you both for your willingness to serve in the public office on behalf of the residents of your district. We have a series of questions we have prepared for both candidates, and we would like you to limit your answers to about 2 minutes. Let's begin with some information about who you are, how long you've lived in the district, your qualifications, and your background. Bob, why don't you begin?
Okay, thank you. My wife Sandy and I have lived in Hudson for 28 years now. It's kind of hard to believe. Our kids grew up here and we got involved in all the normal activities, the Hudson Hockey Association and gymnastics, booster ball, all the very cool things that the area has to offer. I work for a software firm in a virtual office, and we provide retirement software to companies all over the country. And I've also spent a lot of years volunteering with a national trade association based out in Washington, D.C., the American Society for Pension Professionals and Actuaries. I was privileged to be on the board of directors, the executive committee serving as vice president and treasurer, and I really had a great opportunity to work side by side with some of the most prominent benefit professionals in the country. That really gave me a great opportunity to hone my leadership skills. Although I do have to admit I got a little burned out on it, and so I decided to kind of come back and refocus my efforts locally. So that's when I decided to run. I found at that time, I learned about some of the spending and borrowing that was starting to kick into high gear in the county, and so I did run 2 years ago. I was fortunate enough to be elected, and so I've been very honored to serve the residents of District 6 for the past 2 years, and the county board, and also the Health and Human Services Board.
Thank you.
My name is Tim Hall, and I'd like to thank first Meg for hosting us tonight and making us feel comfortable here. Public speaking, as I told Meg before we started, is not my favorite thing to do. So it's been very nice. I'd also like to thank the River Channel for publicizing this talk and getting the information out to the people who will be voting. And I'd finally like to thank the people at home who are taking the time out of their day to learn about the issues that we face as a county and our proposed solutions for that. My wife Joyce and I, we've been married now for 35 years on New Year's Eve, have 2 wonderful daughters, Betsy and Marie, who work as CNAs in nursing homes in the area. We moved to Hudson in 2007, returned to the area from southern Wisconsin, and chose the area and chose Hudson in particular because we love the feel of the area, the quality of life, the amenities, and the services that are offered here. One of the reasons that I want to run is because I want to help preserve that. My work experience has been in engineering. I grew up in southern Wisconsin, went to the University of Wisconsin-Madison where I got my electrical engineering degree, and then after graduation moved for the first time to the Twin Cities to work for Honeywell Incorporated as an avionics engineer. I've since worked at 3M, Cummins Onan, Motorola Cellular, and GE Medical. I think the experience that I've gained in those positions solving complex problems on very constrained budgets will be useful in deliberations at the county board level. And I want to offer that service to the public in this role. It's a continuation of the volunteering efforts that I've done for the Hudson Urban Forestry Board, soccer coaching, Habitat for Humanity, as well as the work that I've done with the West Cap tutoring program.
Thank you, gentlemen. Let's move on and be a little more specific about why you want to serve on the county board. This time we'll start with you.
I'll just restate what I had said before. I guess I jumped the gun a little bit on that question, so I apologize for that. But quite frankly, we did pick this area on purpose. And I've been following the developments in the county. I guess I started paying attention with the debate that rose over the nursing home back several years back. Since my daughters do work in the industry in the area, they had some thoughts on that and were pretty vocal to me about it. So I started following the board on that and watching the county board meetings. And actually, I find them quite interesting. I want to contribute to what I see as a progression here in the county of starting to take care of things that may have been let go or a little bit too long. I want to keep steering the county forward, strengthening our infrastructure, but at the same time bringing efficiencies to the operation that I think my background would be well suited for. I've spent 35 years as an engineer building solutions that are optimized and efficient, and working with teams to do the same thing. I think that we have opportunities here where we could apply those skills.
Bob?
Well, I've obviously learned a lot about the county and the operations for the past 2 years. And I think that the primary reason that I really wanted to run again is that I'm committed to reducing or curbing the excessive spending and borrowing binge that the county has been on for about the last 3 to 4 years. I'm very concerned that the county had borrowed over $65 million without taxpayer approval in the last 3 years, with another $10 million coming for in another year or so in capital improvement projects. The operating budget has increased over $10 million in just the past 2 years. So I really believe that this is unsustainable. And what I'd really like to see is us reprioritize our focus on the critical services. The things that are, there's a lot of people in the county that I've learned through Health and Human Services that have a lot of needs. We need to focus on those needs, our elderly, our disabled, our veterans, to make sure that we're providing those services and not borrowing money on a lot of non-essential items that I'm going to cover in another question. Thank you.
Okay. Bob, we'll start with you on this one. What do you see as the most important issues to be addressed? You kind of touched on that by the county board in the next 2 years and beyond.
Yeah, there's a number of different issues. I mentioned the excessive borrowing and spending, so I'll move on to a couple other items. Child protection services. We had 33 instances of pulling children out of the homes in 2016. We had 93 in 2017. And that is continuing to occur in 2018. And that is primarily due to methamphetamine use by parents, not necessarily the opioid problem, but there's still a significant meth problem right here in St. Croix County that we need to recognize. So that's really an important issue. There's a new program called Family-Centered Treatment, which really focuses on the family itself and not just the child. So it gives us the opportunity to address some of the issues with the parents as well. That just started last summer. Preliminary results have been very, very promising, but we still have a ways to go on that. I think it's also important that we restore full county funding for the Hudson Area Joint Library. There's a lot of misinformation out there. It's a very complex issue, but I really believe that the county needs to restore funding to the Hudson Library, and that's going to be an important issue that'll probably pop up again this summer. Getting the nursing home and the health campus to operating in the black. Contrary to popular belief, it's not operating in the black when you add in debt service. We lost $500,000 last year, and it'll be over $1 million in 2018. So that's going to be an issue that's really going to need to be addressed, as well as continuing focus on water quality. I was honored to be on the county's water quality study group, and that's still going to be an issue that's going to take a number of years to implement the recommendations.
Okay. Tim?
Thank you. I have to say that I think Bob has hit most of the issues square on the head. I agree with him. I have some additional ones, but let's go through that. Clearly, the opioid and meth and alcohol abuse, if you want to go that far, is a continuing problem for the county and accelerating, not just for St. Croix County, but also for the state and for the nation. We can't solve it by ourselves at the county level, but we can and have taken steps that I want to make sure that we continue. Number one, we have Narcan now with all first responders in the county, and I think that's an excellent first step. I know that it's saved several lives already. We've lost a number of people in the community to drug overdose. It's touched my family, and I'm sure it's touched many of yours. That's something that we need to continue to focus on and a continued attention to. The other item that I'm concerned about, that we'll talk about more, is growth. Now, the growth that's coming to the county we're predicted to be the fastest growing county in the state. That's going to put strains on our services that we need to address. It's also going to bring opportunities as well. We have budget pressures. We know that we're receiving reduced funding from state and federal sources because of some of the law changes that have happened there. So we're getting less income from that source, and we're also having increased wage pressure. Our neighbors across the river are paying better wages than we do. We have wonderful employees at the county, and I want to make sure that we can retain them. The board has taken action to do that. Finally, one other thing I want to do is emphasize the spending that has occurred on maintenance was long overdue. It's equivalent to having left our car without changing the oil for 10 years. The nursing home was a public referendum and was strongly endorsed by county residents. And I do agree that we need to make sure that we keep it operating as efficiently as possible and in the black if possible. Lastly, transit. All of our cities here are not connected by any sort of ride-sharing service, and I would like to address that.
Okay, thank you both. Tim, we'll start with you. Do you see any areas where the county could reduce spending without reducing services?
Well, that's always a good question, and in my experience as a leader in industry, it's a question you always have to ask, and I know that the board asks every year of every department head, what would happen if we reduced your spending in your department by 5% or so? And each department head has to come back with the impact of that. My understanding from watching county board meetings, looking at the minutes, looking at the county budget, is that there would be service cuts in some cases in some departments. In others, there may be layoffs or staff reductions. That tells me that these departments are not operating with any sort of excess capacity or fat. Now, you could talk about reprioritization, but I think from my understanding, we're offering the basic services that the county wants and asks for. I do think that we could apply some process engineering philosophies, make things more efficient, or look for more efficiencies within the departments. That doesn't necessarily mean that we cut the budget, but we may rearrange how the work is done and who's doing the work. And I would capitalize on my experience in that area in engineering consulting to bring that skill set to the county board.
Okay. Bob?
Well, I would agree with Tim that I think operationally it's going to be really a challenge to reduce spending. However, I do have some very specific examples that I'd like to offer. There are areas that we have the opportunity to reduce spending and borrowing. So here's some examples of a couple things that we have already committed to borrow money to spend on. $100,000 for flush toilets in a kitchen in a county park. Close to $400,000 a carryover from 2016 for restroom and showers at a county park. Here's another one, $50,000 that we're borrowing strictly for a consultant study to see how we can make our county parks look more consistent. Okay, well, I have a little trouble with some of those because I think that we're borrowing money for non-essential services rather than focusing on the critical services that the county needs to be delivering. $100,000 already allocated for bike path development. Now let me touch on the bike path development real quickly. This was a $33 million plan to the county board for a bike path and pedestrian, and that was kind of the skinny plan. And that also did not include any maintenance costs of all these bike paths. Now, I would admit, I bought a new bike last year, and I love to bike with my wife. I would be one that would take advantage of all these bike paths. But quite frankly, the bike path the plan was too excessive and too expensive. We need a practical approach and one that is going to be much more cost-effective and more affordable. And there's also eminent domain issues along with the bike path issue as well.
Okay. Bob, can you talk, is the county's plan for maintaining and improving the county's infrastructure sufficient? Why or why not?
Yeah, I reviewed the 2018 budget, and quite frankly, at this point, I really have every reason to believe that the current plan for maintaining and improving our infrastructure is reasonably sufficient. I didn't see really any red flags. I'd also add that I have a lot of confidence in our highway commissioner. I think he's doing a great job with regard to our roads and highways. I do mention that I did vote against the borrowing $27 million for the new highway facility. Not that we didn't need one, because we definitely do need a new highway facility if you take a look at the old one. But I thought $27 million was a little excessive. I also was very concerned that the majority of supervisors did not want to allow voters to weigh in on borrowing that $27 million. And that's kind of the opposite of the transparency as far as I'm concerned. So that's why I voted against that.
Okay. Tim?
I agree that the infrastructure from my watching the board meetings, reading the county reports, and just actually using the infrastructure, that it is in good hands right now. There's a good process that's conducted every year where the county board works with the department heads to plan and identify what infrastructure maintenance and upgrades need to be done. They're prioritized well, and they're scheduled so that in the world that I come from, when you know about expenses coming up, you can generally get much more efficient delivery of the service at a better price than if you're addressing things at the last minute. That has not always been the case with the county board. In previous terms, there were a lot more people on the board. The board size has been reduced, which has helped the decision-making process. But many items were deferred for whatever reason. We've had to catch up on those. I do want to make sure that we continue to be proactive in our approach to maintenance and infrastructure strengthening where possible. We have to, every year, continue that process, rigorously looking at where we're spending the money, is it in the right place, and there will be gotchas that hop up occasionally, but ideally, most of that should be behind us. On the county maintenance building, we have over $250 million worth of maintenance facilities and equipment. It seems to me that it's a good idea to make sure that that investment by the public's purse is properly maintained and taken care of. The building was needed. I think that on the bicycle path, for example, and other issues, I would like to see more of an investigation as to partnering with private industries for those initiatives. My understanding is that what is on the table right now is merely a plan, and no monies other than the initial have been committed. But I do think that I would like to see more work on making sure that the public is involved in that. And finally, on one last note on the vote, it was a perfectly acceptable way to make a decision. And really, if we did a public referendum on every issue before us, we wouldn't need a county board. That's why there are 19 people who are elected to make those decisions.
Thank you both. Tim, you touched on this earlier, but it's expected that St. Croix County's population will continue to grow. What challenges and opportunities do you see with this growth?
Well, I'm excited about the opportunities and actually energized by some of the challenges because I want to face those head on. And just for a few that I've already touched on briefly, I'll go into a little more detail. With growing population, I would expect to see a one-for-one scaling in the number of people using the court system, our social services, roads, and other parks and infrastructure. So the wear and tear on those facilities are going to grow. We're going to have an increased need because we're also not just people coming here. We're going to, hopefully, if we get ahead of this, we're going to bring in great jobs and great companies for our citizens to work at these businesses. So that flips over to the opportunity side. Those businesses, however, are going to be and have been asking for transportation options to get people to their place of business. I touched on it earlier. Right now, there is a county van service, and it's a wonderful service, but it does require you scheduling several days ahead. You have to be 60 or older, or a spouse of someone, or disabled to use the system, and it only works within the communities where they're based. We need a way to get people back and forth between towns, and ideally over across the river. So I think that's an opportunity and a challenge. If we rise to the challenge and we make that available, I think that will help bring those businesses. I know as somebody who works with businesses every day, the infrastructure of the area where we go to is a very important part of their decision-making process, and I want to be a target for them. Finally, I think that one of the things that we need to do is be transparent as a board. So as I make decisions, I don't come at it from a particular viewpoint. I come at it from more of a problem-solving method. What are we trying to do? Who do we need to involve? And what are the tools that we have to get to an efficient, cost-effective solution for what the public has indicated that they want to have as a service?
Bob?
Okay, well, there's definitely going to be some challenges. I had a great conversation with the highway commissioner last summer when I was touring the facility, the existing facility. He indicated that they were actually already anticipating that because of the new bridge, we could be looking at another 40 to 50,000 increase in population in that, particularly in that northwest quadrant of the county. So obviously managing that growth is going to be a real challenge. Making sure, as Tim was referencing, making sure that we can provide the needed public safety, making sure that we can provide the services that we're providing to all the residents and the rest of the residents in the county. The roads obviously would be a concern. Water quality, quite frankly, I think might be a concern. It's generally a rural area in that area of the county. And so all of a sudden you're going to have a lot of wells and you're going to have a lot of septic systems. And some of those septic systems has the potential to contribute to contamination in the water quality. So that can be a concern. As far as opportunities, obviously increasing the tax base is going to provide some flexibility to make sure that we have the ability to meet the additional services in the public service. But I would also add that it also provides an opportunity to potentially reduce some of the tax or the debt service that we've got from all the borrowing that's been going on, and potentially, dare I say, maybe the opportunity to reduce some of our taxes. So I think we need to be open to that rather than automatically assuming that we're going to spend that additional revenue.
Okay, thank you both. Bob, what other issues do you feel the county board should address that they haven't?
Yeah, we touched on the borrowing and spending, keeping a key eye on child protection. As I mentioned, refocusing our efforts on the critical services that are important. I think there's kind of a flip side to that question, that there's also areas that I think that we probably shouldn't necessarily be focusing on. For example, the discussions regarding sanctuary county status, which I don't agree with. And let me talk a little bit about mass transit. We're only a county of 87,000 people, and we're primarily rural. I think implementing a mass transit system, a bus system in the county that is going to be 90% taxpayer subsidized is a real concern for me, because I can't be convinced that the ridership is going to be there. And to me, from what I've learned about it, it would turn into kind of a bureaucratic boondoggle that's going to cost the taxpayers a lot of money. I don't think we're in a position yet to do that. I do, as Tim referenced, there are services that are available, and what I'd really rather see is let's look at those existing services and see how we can expand those services to meet some of the additional needs in the county, rather than go to the extent of establishing a whole mass transit system, which I really don't believe is needed at this point.
Tim?
Well, I'll start out by agreeing with Bob on two of these points. Number one, I have no idea why we would ever even talk about becoming a sanctuary county. To me, it's a nonsensical issue that really is distracting from more important work that the board needs to do. Secondly, I also agree, I've worked for a number of years with 3M's Intelligent Transportation Group, working with bus companies. We are not a good target or a good model for a mass transit system. I don't think that that would work here. I don't think it, for all the reasons Bob said, I think it's a bad idea. However, I want to go back and say, we need to get rideshare services here, not just for people needing to get to work, but we also need to get shut-ins, people able to age at home. It would be so much better for people's quality of lives if we had a Lyft or an Uber, and we may have to talk to them about some sort of partnership in order to subsidize for certain low-income folks to be able to use that service. But I think that's probably a better, or working with the companies who need to get workers back and forth, setting up private van services or encouraging that sort of transit option. I think that's a better model for us. The other thing I think the county needs to talk to, Bob mentioned as well, is water quality. We have a number of large factory farms. Now, there is a right to farm, and I fully support it. Coming from an agricultural background myself, I get it. But now we have much larger storage containers full of liquid manure very close to the headwaters of some of our nation's best trout streams. We're putting a huge resource risk out there with that, and I want to see us at least advocate at the state level to have more oversight of buffer strips for that water. Lastly, I think that there's a great opportunity for the county to instigate a program of efficiency drives, working with county employees to take their suggestions, look at how their workflows go, and make sure that we can save money there where we can.
Okay. Thank you both. Before we conclude, I'd like to give you both a chance. Is there anything else you'd like to add? Tim?
Just that I've been heartened, and I hope Bob has too, as I've knocked on doors and spoken with people. As you mentioned, Meg, at the beginning of this, at the national level, there's just so much acrimony and vitriol that's flying around from everyone. And quite frankly, that's not the political climate I remember growing up with, nor the one I want to be a part of. So as I've talked to people, as I've met with Bob, I'm heartened by the fact that we're able to have rational adult discussions. We can agree, we can disagree, but we are, in all things in this community, civil. And I really would like to thank those of you in the community for that. It's made me feel a lot better about the political situation today. Next, one of the things I will commit to you if I'm elected as your county board supervisor is that I will listen to you. I will analyze the problems without preconceived ideas about what the solution is. I don't come at this from any sort of ideological bent. For me, it's a problem and it needs to be solved. It's an opportunity, it needs to be grasped, and we need to do that together. So in summary, if you agree with those positions and that thought process, I would welcome and ask for your vote on April 3rd.
Thank you. Bob?
Thank you for sponsoring this forum, by the way. Gave me an opportunity to meet my opponent, which first time I had met you, Tim. And thank you for mentioning Lyft and Uber, because I totally agree with you there. Those are things that I didn't see the Transportation Committee enter or really discuss when we talked about it. I'll make this nice and short and simple. Basically, what I believe the county board needs at this point is a good interjection of common sense. Let's be practical. Let's make good, fiscally responsible choices and focus on the things that are important, that are really matter to our citizens and our taxpayers. And that's what I bring to the table.
Okay. Well, I want to thank you both for participating today and again for your willingness to serve. We want to encourage the public to watch for the interviews with the candidates for Districts 4, 5, and 7, along with this interview on the River Channel. And we want to remind everyone in St. Croix County to mark their calendars and vote on April 3rd. Thank you for joining us.